So hello and welcome back to another Improvement Season podcast. This is me, Pascal Steve. On the other end, it is Steve Hall. Steve was just nodding to me because most of the time we are kind of talking about whose turn it is to introduce the podcast. Yeah. And I was just like starting with it, and I think it was my turn, but I'm not entirely certain.
So I was just Steve, like nodding. Yeah, I thought you were about to ask me, is it your turn or my turn? And I was like, yeah, you know already it's your turn. I'm normally the one who forgets, to be honest. I'm just like, I have no idea. But I think because I haven't done any podcasts this week, maybe that makes me remember it better. I don't know. But yeah, because last week there was a couple, and it's been where I actually posted the other day just saying like how ahead we are with them. And the unfortunate thing is when you're like that, and I just noticed, I don't know if you saw it, who was on the Iron Culture podcast?
Yes, I
just
saw
this
it.
week. And I was like, god damn it. Ours is old news by the time it comes out.
Unfortunately, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's happened a few times. And I guess it's just one of those things where like you can only be so flexible with these sort of things. And like if it's like, I don't know, that sort of one, it wasn't like, hey, it has to come out immediately, because it wasn't like a hot off the press type of thing.
So just so that the people know about it and are aware of it, we are the pioneers. We are the ones who are approaching the scientists and the interesting people always the first. But the episodes come always out a little bit later, and then someone else is actually jumping on board.
I wonder, I know on the member site, people got early access, so they get like a week early access to the podcast. If we have like 4 episodes in the tank, I don't know if there's probably not an easy way to give them access to all of those, but that'd actually be pretty like more incentivizing, because actually there's a lot of content there. Because yeah, it's just, I don't know, sometimes it's just the way it happens. I reach out to a bunch of people, sometimes they all want to book in relatively close, and then I just like get a ton done. And yeah, neither of us like to be like, hey, we record this week and it's out this week. I think quite a few podcasts run like that, and that's just, it's not sustainable. And actually that's probably why a lot of podcasts don't sustain a weekly episode, because it's just like, what if that guest cancels? I've had that a number of times where a guest will cancel and it's like, oh, I don't have anything. It's been close a few times. I've definitely cut it close a few times, but not too bad.
I think it's like we've already discussed with other popular podcasts nowadays, where it's kind of a whole production team behind it. I think it's a different thing. Because you have, this is your living, and you can really solely focus on that, and you're flying people in, and you probably have already some pre-recorded episodes that you could throw in that aren't really as urgent. I don't know.
And I have noticed some of those, like we talk about the Modern Wisdom one, I almost listen to every episode now, just because I find I just kind of like them. They're different. It's like very different information. And actually, as a podcast host, and Chris has done really well, I'm trying to like, I don't know, pick up anything I can from him in terms of how he's hosting. I'm a different host though to him. He's quite like assertive, puts himself into the conversation, not necessarily interrupting, but like I'm much more like sit, let them go type of thing, I think. But what was I going to say about that? Oh, so yeah, even with him, and he releases 3 a week. I don't think he's done that the whole time. I think he like started 1 a week, 2 a week, then 3 a week. But here sometimes do like individual Q&A episodes. So it's just him doing a Q&A. So it's like, you know, when that happens, you imagine that's when the person hasn't been able to get a guest in time to fill that gap, I imagine.
Steve, by the way, what is this for a cap that you're wearing? It looks like as if you're now in an aviator club or in a sailing club, or some kind of fancy, very expensive cars that you're now in.
With the branding on it.
Yeah, exactly.
This is all the rage in the UK with the online coaching scene, it seems. I think I landed on it kind of, I don't know how I even landed on it, but like a athleisure brand, Cole Buxton. And they're based in London, actually. And it's like a luxury, like leisure wear, basically. So yeah, I picked up this cap in the sale, and yeah, I quite like it. Yeah.
Sale.
In the sale, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Not that I can sail. I have actually been sailing before, but it's not really for me.
Yeah. So you're not just walking around London and experiencing and enjoying the high society on a daily basis?
High society. No, I mean, I don't know if I could call, it's not like that expensive. It's like high society. So yeah, it's just comfy, oversized t-shirts and joggers mostly. And a hat. But yeah, I tend to buy stuff when it's in the sale because it's pretty pretty pricey. To be
Oh
honest.
yeah, absolutely.
For
I mean, for me personally, I don't give a shit about kind of brand wares and all those luxurious brands. I don't really see the point in it. And for me personally, I don't even need a name on on some kind of garment that I'm wearing. It just needs to function well, do its job well, and that's all I need. And I'm buying stuff like on bulk whenever it fits me well, and then I'm good for a couple of years.
I'm a bit of both. With stuff, like I definitely see where you're at with that. And then it's only since I've purchased a few things where it's been a bit more expensive where I'm at, like, actually there is an improvement in quality. So like this t-shirt might be 4 times the price of this cheap one, but it will last 4 times the length, some of this stuff. So it's not always the case. But until you've experienced it, I wouldn't completely discount it. At least that's been my experience. And it tends to fit better as well.
I've experienced it. Let alone here the suit that I was buying, which was tailor-made and all that kind of stuff. It fits nicely, it feels great and all that kind of stuff, but I think it's still not justified, at least not for me. Maybe it is for other people, but at least not for me, to pay that amount of money for clothes that you're wearing. I rather than buy, I don't know, for the amount that I've been paying for the suit, I can probably, so it is of course a different type of clothing, right? I couldn't wear a suit that is just coming out of something like H&M or Zara, would never really fit me. So there's a justification for that. But if it was just like a t-shirt and that t-shirt costs like 200 grand or so, I'm just like, man, for 200 grand, I could buy 20 t-shirts that would probably last me like for the next 5 to 10 years. So
200 grand could get you a lot of t-shirts.
yeah, exactly. I mean, you can go to H&M and then get like, I know that there are t-shirts. This is one of those shirts that cost like €5 over an H&M. And of course, we could go down the rabbit hole of like, how it has been produced, where it has been produced, is it ethically and morally something that you can't stand behind and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, we all probably have our packages to bear of ignorance. So, and this is one of them where I come in with ignorance.
Yeah, it's tricky when you look into all of that stuff. Like it just starts, you can get yourself into a rabbit hole of like, hey, I'm just going to like, don't know, walk around naked and like have a farm.
Exactly. And the thing is, then we are also at the topic of like food, for example. Can this be a morally and ethically viable thing to be doing? And where does it end and where does it begin? So if you really want to live a life like this, you would probably have to make a lot of sacrifices that I'm at least not willing to make. Whether some things are questionable is probably not even then up to debate.
I have one area I was trying to think, where does Pascal spend his money on, where he's willing to spend more? And I have a few ideas. 1, tattoos. 2, coffee. And I know you still try and budget with these, but you're still not willing to like go like, hey, I'm going to just have like, I don't know, what's the instant coffee? You're not going to do that. Yeah. It might be the cheapest. You're not going to do instant coffee.
That's true.
And then 3, like time. So you wouldn't go and get like, I don't know, a flight over there, over here, over there to save like, I don't know, 10%. You'd spend more to get that time back.
I think you're absolutely on point. When it comes to tattoos, though, I have to say that I never feel good at spending money on tattoos. I even said it to my tattoo artist. I even said it to my tattoo artist that it's an ambivalent state that I'm in, because I don't want to spend that money because I know how ridiculous it is to get some ink underneath your skin and paying that amount of money. But at the same time, you can easily then make the arguments that is maybe a justification for yourself in order to make you feel better. I'm very well aware of that. In saying like, what else am I spending my money on? Clothing? Not so much, right? Other materialistic goods? Not so much. So at some point, you probably want to spend the money on something to also, in return, have an improvement of your life quality. And for me personally, it is kind of tattooing as well. Whereas same goes then for the things that you've brought up about time. I am more than willing to spend a little bit additional time in order to have a great experience and in order to have a great time, save some time and have a great experience. I think that this is, for me, also here, for me personally, what life makes it worth living, of like having convenience, where things are running efficiently the way that supposed to where you're saving time and you just have a great experience. And there are so many services where I'm just like, oh man, this was an awful experience just because I wanted to save a little bit of money.
Yeah, I'm definitely like that. And I think ultimately it just comes down to, is it within your budget? And like, you're not spending and getting into crazy debt and like ruining other people's lives because of it, and you're not able to take care of yourself. As long as you're doing that, hey, like I imagine you're part of that. It's just like, hey, spend 100%. Your money how you want. If you're not impacting me, like, come on.
Yeah, and I honestly, it's like you said, and what like you assumed, I don't really have a lot of things that I'm spending money on. I don't. I'm very frugal when it comes to frugal.
Yeah.
Frugal. When it comes to this, I don't need a lot in order to feel happy. So, but of course and this is kind of the crux in it, you don't want to live a life where you're earning money, you're spending a lot of time getting money in return for nothing. So that you then end up with having a lot of money sitting in a bank account that is being eaten away by inflation.
Yeah.
Doesn't really make a lot of sense. So there needs to be, and this is something that we've talked about in the past, Steve, it needs to be a fine balance between what is in your budget, what gives you a certain amount of pleasure and happiness in your life. And this is independent of what it is. For others, it is materialistic goods. For others, it's kind of going on holiday, whatever it is. You should, of course, allow for some spending to take place, because also from an economic perspective, this is how you make other people happy as well, to some extent, right? If everyone were to save their money, there wouldn't be any kind of money in circulation, and that wouldn't be good either as well. So yeah, what is it about you, Steve? Where are you spending money on? So tattoos, of course, but I also know that you like to also buy some anime t-shirts, for example, that are, I would assume, rather expensive. What else?
Talking about the economy, I guess I like the ones Jackson Pios makes at Kushiro. They're his anime t-shirts. I bought quite a few from those, and it becomes expensive because of the shipping from Australia becomes fairly expensive, but not terribly. I've definitely spent more on a t-shirt than like the cost of those that have to be sent over. And also it's like supporting the economy. I kind of see it as supporting him, like, I don't know, in a weird way. It's like I like the work he's done with and he's come on the podcast, that sort of thing. I like the brand and what he's doing there. So kind of supporting him in that way. It's probably similar like when you give money to your tattoo artist, you're like, hey, I just appreciate you and the work you're doing.
100%.
So kind of like support that. But no, similarly to you, like I probably spend a bit more on clothing now and then, just to like, I don't know, I end up doing that, even though when I don't need it. I do like things when they fit well, gives me a bit more confidence when things like, I feel like they look good. But yeah, similar to you, man, I can't think of anything that I like consistently spend at these. Probably all these subscriptions, like fucking Netflix, Disney Plus, don't know what else, Spotify, like this starts adding up, mobile phone.
Even there, I'm saving money because I don't really see the point in it. So there you can see how frugal I am when it comes to shit like this, because many people are being stuck in those subscription-based services. This is also why so many companies have switched over to a subscription-based service, which, by the way, something that I find rather annoying, because not everything has to come with a subscription-based model. Such as, for example, this is one of my biggest pet peeves, Adobe products like Photoshop, Audition, Premiere Pro. This is subscription-based service, which is in itself, if you're a professional, not that much to pay. Right? If you really need to use all of those products on a consistent basis. But there are even people outside of that who just want to use those products as a hobby. And for that, it's just utterly ridiculous that you don't even have the option or opportunity to make a standalone purchase.
And it's like, what's the other one? Instagram, where you have to, now people are paying, I don't know what the cost is, but like a monthly fee to have a check mark by their name. And obviously I know there's some benefits to that. I haven't heard anyone talk about it for a while. I wonder how many people subscribed and then were like, hey, nothing's changed, maybe I just unsubscribe, because I'm kind of like, I don't know. It's like you don't think you need insurance until you need insurance, right?
That's
like sometimes it's like that. And it's kind of insurance in that case because you get better support, you have better security, whatever. But I'm like, hey, I've had this Instagram account, I don't know, a decade or something. Nothing's ever happened. And of course, like that's when something's going to happen. Let's touch wood that it doesn't. But I'm still like, man, it's not like I can afford it. It's not an amount like a case of not being able to afford it. I just detest having a subscription to something where it's like, I'm feeding you content in a way, but obviously it's for the
not only
too.
that. So I don't have any kind of opinion about Instagram and its blue tick box kind of subscription model also. For this, I really don't have any kind of opinion on that. But the price to benefit ratio always is in the eye of the beholder. So is it for you worth the money? And if it's for you, questionable whether it is valued at a certain or valued at the exact price that you think is appropriate. This is where then kind of sometimes disparities and discrepancies come into play. Whereas, for example, here as the example that I just brought up about Adobe products, I think that they are great products for professionals, perfectly well priced, but for just people who are doing this as a hobby, it's way overpriced in my opinion, and that you don't have an option of then just having a standalone product or so. It's just, I don't know. This is also something that many gamers very much dislike about upgrades or add-ons, that you now, over the past years, the gaming scene has changed completely, but you have to purchase more and more products in the game or as an add-on, and they are just milking the product. And this is, I don't think the correct way to go about it. And this is what I also mean with not everything has to be a subscription-based model. And right now it feels like everything is a subscription-based model. And this is just from a sheer principle perspective, it annoys me and puts me off of signing up to certain services.
It's like with, I think it was EasyJet, they just started charging for every little thing in the flight. It's like soon they're going to charge you to go to the toilet. Like you just know that's going to happen. Actually, that's something I detest, talking about that sort of thing. Man, it makes us sound really tight, but I'm sure everyone relates to this. You know, when you're busting for the loo and then you're like, the toilet, it costs like £1 to go in or whatever it is, a certain amount of money. And I'm just like,
pisses me off every single time.
One, I hate that I have to pay to just relieve myself. Yep. And two, I don't have any cash on me ever.
No. And it's like you said, for some people, it may sound like nitpicky and all that kind of stuff, but especially when you are on the highway and there's just this one place and you have to pay money for it. And outside there's a lovely tree that I could pee at. So do you want me to pay some money there? Or do you want me to stand outside and make it smell very badly because 1,000 other people have pissed in here already?
Like, I was going to say that the tree's just looking soaked at the moment because everyone's like, exactly, fuck that.
And it should be telling because I don't know if you've ever checked out kind of city design when it comes to walking pathways. There's, of course, some sense behind how they are structuring the roads. Also when it comes to walking, you know? And sometimes, especially when it comes to parks, you can sometimes see that people choose a different path that is more efficient for them, but this is over than the grass. And you can see it trampled down already because it was inappropriate or improper planning. And people found it to be the most appropriate way or pathway for them. And it's kind of the same here as well. The least form of resistance for me is to pee at the tree and not pay like £1 in order to just like use the bathroom.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I don't know where I was going with this chat or where we were going with it, but something else, actually, I will say one other thing I'll be willing to spend a little bit more on. I'll still get it cheaper if I can, is like food, just in general. Like I'll be willing to spend a little bit more on that. And I think a lot of people listening are probably along those lines as well, where it's like, hey, like we take care of what we're eating by so much, like it often makes sense to like pay a little bit more to make sure that it's potentially especially a slightly high quality.
When it comes with a lovely experience, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Like something that will stick with you for the rest of your life, for example. I know that you were at what is it called again? The black one in London, the quite expensive restaurant.
We've eaten various ones like the Shard, like the
exactly this one.
buildings.
This one. I do remember that you've eaten there with Charlotte at some point, and I think that it wasn't really a cheap restaurant, but at the same time, it was a lovely experience. And this is something that I had in 2014 when I was in Tokyo as well. This was one of the greatest meals that I've ever had. And I still remember it because it was more than just the food. It was the view over entire Tokyo and all that kind of stuff. It was lovely.
It's funny enough, talking about that, me and Cameron, my friend, like oldest friend, we each year go out for a steak around Christmas, and that's like our gift to one another. So we went to this restaurant called Beast in London. Every steak there, it was like uncomfortably expensive, where you're like, oh, like fuck, I can't even remember the prices, but it was like the bill came, like you're spending £100 per person, like with buying barely anything basically. So, and he bought like a bottle of wine to himself, which was super expensive. And I was like, I'm not drinking, like enjoy, just had this whole bottle. But the steak, it was like, I'm so sad to say this, the steak wasn't even like, it's just not to my preference. It was like a really expensive, like Wagyu, really fatty marbled steak. And I was just like, man, I prefer just my one that I buy from Lidl.
It can happen as well.
Can happen. But again, it's the experience of being there with like your friend and in this like environment of the restaurant. But
I mean, we chatted about it now long enough, I think. But one more thing to add is I don't know how it is in London, but Berlin is very much known for having a lot of hipster places when it comes to eating. And I very much dislike most places because the food isn't even good. You're treated like shit most of the time because that is just, I don't know, the cool vibe. You're being kind of ignored most of the time, and if you're then ordering, you're not even treated like a proper customer or so. And then the food isn't even good, and they are charging you a shit ton of money. This is something that I very much dislike, to be honest.
I don't know how those places survive. Like
most of the time they
shocked.
don't. Most of the time they don't. Okay. Like after 5 years, they are then gone again. It's so crazy because I have like a map over on Google Maps with starred places that I just wanted to save. And most of the stars were still present from the pre-COVID era. And now I was just looking over Google Maps at one point and I was just clicking through the stars. And there were so many restaurants that don't exist anymore. But they are still like in my Google Maps. It's crazy. How many restaurants just disappeared? Yeah,
it's scary. It was like a survival of the fittest, but I don't know if that's a fair, even way of putting it. It's kind of something that you'd never want to really happen. I guess a lot of them adapted to become like Deliveroo and those sort of services. Those exploded during COVID, of course. It's absolutely wild.
Some people were, of course, in an unfortunate situation because if you've opened that restaurant a year pre-COVID, probably you didn't have sufficient funds in order to get through a time like this.
Yeah. Terrible timing.
Oh, it was. Anyway,
in
Steve.
Other news. How are you doing this week? Because I think we're both feeling a bit tired.
Very tired. Very, very tired. I mean, today I took a rest day that was unplanned because I woke up with a very tight and stiff back. And I thought, because today is Wednesday, tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday are the last days of this mesocycle before I'm then getting my hat tattooed. And so that is happening on Friday, and then I'm traveling to London. And because of that, I wanted to train up until this point. But at the same time, I didn't really want to end this mesocycle with a back day. I don't know. I'm right now at the point where I'm just like, oh man, I'm kind of sick and tired of back for the time being. Even though that I love my back sessions, it felt always heavy over the past couple of days and weeks. That's why I thought like, all right, totally fine to have another rest day here. That's where I then can tomorrow have chest and then another leg session, and then it's done. But I woke up with a very tight back, and I think that this is just contributing and confirming the fact that I'm just like, I need that deload, man. I really need that deload. I'm shattered. And funny enough, I said it to you, Steve, that on paper, this is now week number 9. Of course, it's not like a normal mesocycle of 9 weeks of pushing, but I said it as well to you that something like the rest days that I had in between was never really like a deload rest day where I just did decide to not go and train. It was always accompanied with recovering from a tattoo or traveling. and that was never really relaxing. So I think that the accumulated fatigue is pretty high, and it's very tough to try to progress in the gym right now. I can very much feel that.
One of the symptoms, obviously your back, but some of the symptoms, I wonder if you experience these. This is always the telltale sign for me as I'm coming into that week before a deload, is my motivation to train drops off starkly. I just wake up feeling still fatigued, even though I've had like good number of hours in bed, and like just cognitively, I'm not as sharp as I should be, and just like work, like each day I'm like, ugh. Like everything is just a little bit more effort. I don't necessarily always get like niggles and things like this that are telltale signs, but that kind of systemic fatigue. And for me as well, my digestion and appetite tends to like go down, basically. It's not as good as it normally is, but I think that's probably different, maybe different for you, I don't know.
So appetite is not really impacted that much, but it is definitely lethargy, where I'm just waking up in the morning. I don't really feel rested. Sometimes my sleep is even that impacted that I wake up earlier, counterintuitively, but it's probably because stress levels are so high that you can't really rest that well. And I'm just tired throughout the entire day, where I don't want to consume any more additional caffeine, but I also feel like I have to in order to make it through the day. Like that vicious cycle, you know, that is of course not productive, you know it, but at the same time, if you feel absolute like garbage by 1 p.m. and you think like, how the hell am I able, or should I survive now the next 3 to 4 to 5 hours of work, then pick up the kids, play with them and have a good time with them as well. It is freaking challenging at times, and I can really feel it in my mood. So I'm someone, I think, where you can really tell by my mood if I'm overreached or very much stressed. It's not so much that, I don't know, I'm getting anxious or so, but you can really tell if I get very irritated and very much snappy very quickly, where everything that can be said and will be said, I take maybe even the wrong way. Or I'm not very talkative. And I am not the most extroverted person. People know that, but I can appear as if, because I can be talkative. I have the ability to talk with people, right? But especially in a situation like this, and Katie, of course, noticed it, because when I'm outside talking with more so strangers, this is a skill that I've picked up over the years, especially working in the music industry. I can just chit chat if I really want to. And I don't have an issue with that. But of course, it exhausts me. And Katie feels it then by the end of the day, because I don't have no energy left anymore to really have conversations. And then it's just like I'm sitting there quietly, just eating, listening to what the kids are saying, listening to Katie saying, but not really chiming into the discussion itself.
The word I was going to that was coming to my head was snappy as well. I noticed myself just getting a little bit more snappy. And it's just like little things, like I'm walking along the road and I don't know, someone walks past me and they're a bit close and I'm like, fuck off. Like I don't say that, but I'm just like, oh, that irritated me more than it normally would.
Yeah.
Why am I getting irritated?
Perfect example. And I would very much assume that you are like that as well, Steve. When it comes to gym, when I'm there, I want to do my training session. But if I'm not as fatigued, I'm more than happy to have like a small conversation, right? Like 2 to 5 minutes, totally fine. If it's not like right at the beginning of my workout or so. But if I'm starting to get fatigued and more lethargic, I really don't want to talk with people. And I just want to get my workout done. And I would have very much assumed that people will notice that, especially because I'm more so walking around with a little bit more of a grim look on my face as well.
I'm the same. It's like I'll finish like a set of hack squats. You know, when you're like, you finish a set and you're like, you pushed it all the way to the house. Yeah. You can't even just like sit down. Like I have to walk and be I'm like in an amped up state where I'm like walking around, like not wanting to look at people. I'm just like this. People must look at me and be like, "Hey, can't like it maybe sounds worse than it is, but sometimes that's the way I feel."
No, exactly.
And it becomes a permanent state during prep at some point where you're just permanently like, you know, people put their hood on or their cap down and they're just like, man, I just don't want to talk to anyone. I don't have the energy for you.
Yeah. And I think it's then because I don't want to come across like someone who is that, internally focused hardcore bodybuilder, because that's not who I am. Simple as that. But at the same time, it's then hard to make people outside of that small little bubble we are in understand that I'm coming here for training, and there will be times where I'm a little bit more agitated and irritated. Don't take it the wrong way. It's not about you. It's just about me. And this is not an excuse like, it's not you, it's me. You have to understand it. It's really that. It's not you. I'm more than happy to actually then talk with you if I'm feeling a little bit fresher. But right now, I'm just not in the mood of actually having a chit-chat or conversation.
Yeah, no, I'm the exact same way. I imagine a lot of the listeners, that's where they get to as well. And
yeah.
It almost always just, I guess, actually, I don't know if this is the same for you. When you have consistent and you're not having kind of dipping in and out of training and not because of various lifestyle factors, are you a 5-to-1 accumulation to deload paradigm most of the time as well?
I would say yes, but I think that over the past years, it has very much changed, where it's so many things happened then in life where you needed to modify the training protocol around it. That I can't even recall the last time where there was like a strict 5-to-1 paradigm, because I just felt like it. It was more so due to then circumstances, such as a holiday that is coming up, due to then the tattoo appointments. I mean, ever since the end of June, I'm working now on my back. I had my calf done beginning of the year with the dog and everything. So lots of things happened where I then needed to just modify it or plan it around things in life. And then you need to put down the gas or put the foot on the gas pedal when you need or want to overreach.
That makes me feel like I've had nothing happen this year. But there have been some things I've modified around. For sure.
but maybe this is also why you're seeing tremendous progress, Steve. For me, it's more like a mediocre progress. So
this is something actually I spoke with a client in the gym just the other day, talking about basically like this feeling of, okay, being consistent with anything in life is super important. But when you're super consistent with things, sometimes that means like life doesn't happen, like you just mentioned. So like, hey, it's great that I can just like diet and train and like ride that wave. But then you look back over the year and you're like, what did I actually do that was like fun this year? It's like, maybe I should do more of this. Yeah, of course, training. But I do think sometimes I'm too far into here. And me and Charlotte had this conversation this weekend where she was like, Steve, I want to do more stuff. And I'm like, I do as well. But
come with me to the training session.
yeah, come train with me. But I think it's more like, I don't know, weekends away and like trips. Like I think we've only had one true holiday this year that we didn't even go for like a full week. It's like trying to do a bit more of like life stuff, because you know what I mean? Like you probably have maybe been pulled almost too far in one direction for this last month, but also you appreciate those life elements as well and be able to enjoy those. Yeah. And hopefully you can balance it. Like you get a good combination of the two. Like, hey, you're deloading anyway, go and do some more fun stuff. But sometimes unless you're really good at planning, you don't always manage that.
Let's have a short break and then touch on it another time. Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger. So I have a couple of thoughts around this, because what is it that you do enjoy, Steve? This is training and nutrition and taking care of yourself, right?
Of course, yeah.
And I think it's also probably a somewhat of a social pressure of believing that there's something wrong with solely focusing on that kind of task. I think that if if that's what gives you pleasure and joy and happiness, and this is kind of, you know that this is your thing, then why not try to perfect it and really focus on something like this? And this is, of course, a very biased thought process that I'm having right now. But in the past, in history, in human history, those people who were very good at things were the people who dedicated their entire life to maybe figuring something out. Whether it's kind of philosophy, or there's the documentary about Jiro, Dreams of Sushi, that sushi chef who dedicated his life just to make perfect sushi, right? If you dedicate your life to one thing and one thing only, for the time being, probably the people around you, they may be suffering even, right? But you are doing something with your life that you enjoy. And also, often those are the people who stay in the history books most of the time because they've accomplished something that was bigger than themselves. I'm not saying that what it is that you're doing now with bodybuilding, natural bodybuilding, is bigger than yourself or so, but the underlying message behind it still stands true. And this is why I'm just challenging those beliefs of like, you think that you have to do something because you think that this is the way to go and gives you pleasure and happiness, when in reality, it may just be that this isn't even based on something, some truth or a reality.
No, I think, yeah, for me, definitely I do enjoy just the daily routine and doing these things. Absolutely. And more, and like if I wasn't with Charlotte, I'd probably be even further in that to an unhealthy degree to some extent, where I'd just be in like my own little zone all the time. But I definitely do appreciate life experiences, like, I don't know, just like seeing different cultures and different parts of the world. And my ideal would be able to combine them, so like I can still get in some decent training. Like we went to Vienna and we still trained out there, we still ate to our diet and stuff like that. Not perfect, but still really, really good. Like I love that combination. It's kind of a similar discussion to like picking foods we had last week, where it's like, hey, this might be my most ideal food in terms of taste, this one ideal food in terms of goals. Maybe I'll meet somewhere in the middle, so it's still goal driven but tastes really good. Kind of similar there, where it's like, if I can kind of combine these things. So I just sometimes, I just wouldn't want to look back in like 2-3 years time and be like, what have I done the last 2-3 years apart from like just train and eat? And like, I think I would look back and be like, I feel like I could have done some more like fun stuff. Not fun, but like, I don't know, more different things, like again, going on trips and enjoying that aspect too, and just being a little bit flexible here and there. I think I would appreciate that.
I totally get where you're coming from, and I'm not here, of course, to challenge those things that you're saying. I'm just coming because I'm always questioning myself when it comes to those thought processes that I'm having, which are fairly similar as well. And I always try to look at it from a different perspective of whether I'm just putting on the pink tainted glasses because I think that there's something else that I'm missing. And maybe we are also heavily impacted by what it is that we're seeing around us, also driven by social media, because we envy other people. We see successful other people. We see that they have a balanced life or so, or maybe living the life that we would like to or hope that we ever accomplish, when in reality, it may not even be the life that they are actually living. But because of a self-improvement thing, and we comparing ourselves with others constantly, maybe we're driven by a carrot that is tingling in front of us that we can't ever reach. You know, and that's where I'm coming from, where the desire that is then in front of you is something that we can't even put words to, or can't define even. Where we think that this is what brings us happiness. Once we accomplish that, then there are 10 other things popping up in front of us that we are then chasing, and we are just like the dog that is chasing the postman or so. Right? I don't know.
No, yeah, I totally see where you're coming from, and this wasn't a driven feeling by someone else or anything like that. It was mostly a discussion between me and Charlotte, where she was just like, hey, like I'd love to have actually like done something this weekend. And quite often I find, as long as I, like, this is just the way I tend to be driven, as long as I get my training in and as long as I like hit my nutritional goals, like I'm a pretty happy man. I'm very simple.
Yeah.
But she wants more than that. And I know I want to do that for her. And also I get the benefits from that too. Like, so when she's happier, I'm happier, we're happier. And also I think I appreciate my day-to-day even more when I get pulled away from it a little bit now and then, when I can be flexible. So I don't want to like suddenly, go away every weekend and like multiple trips abroad and whatever. Definitely don't want that. That would be way too stressful. I don't know how people do that. Like literally, if I have 2 back-to-back weekends where I'm like busy, I'm like, fuck, like I need some more like chill time, but just bit more now and then. I think
totally.
nice
I'm just bringing up the contrarian view to it, just because I think it's important for the listener to know that when you're focusing a little bit more on yourself, I think it's sometimes also absolutely appropriate to be selfish in order then to give some pleasure and joy to other people around you. Because if you're just looking out for others, you are kind of neglecting what it is that is important to you. I don't think that you live a life that is worth living for yourself as well. And most of the time, of course, there are always exceptions. You can always cherry pick certain situations where that is not the case, where it's more worthwhile to just solely live for others. But I think that for the vast majority of people living in the Western society, such as ourselves, our demographic, I think that a healthy way of selfishness and egoism is a good thing. And if that also means that there is a certain time out of the day or out of the week that you dedicate for then training, where you just eat whatever it is that you want to eat, I think that doesn't always have to be or have that negative connotation, which I think and feel is often the case, that people feel guilty that they can't possibly just focus on themselves, because selfishness and looking out for yourself has such a negative vibe to it.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting discussion. The way I've looked at this before is because sometimes in prep in particular, that's when you're your most like selfish and you need to control these variables more and more. And I've had clients being like, hey, my people in my life don't tend to understand this, so on and so forth. And they're wanting me to do various things. And like, I've told them I've got to do whatever it is, cardio, I've got to do my steps, I've got to do my training. I need to stick to this diet plan that I have kind of to hit specific goals. And I've been like, hey, if you frame it, and quite often they take that on as themselves, like they've already given themselves the pressure, and it's not actually people giving them pressure. They're just perceiving it as if they should be engaging in more of those activities. And so I try and frame it like, hey, if you had like, you're in accounting and you had like a huge accountancy exam at the end of the month, and you were telling people, hey, I can't go out because I got to revise tonight because this is the only time I've got to be able to pass this exam. I think when you put it in those terms and it's like, education and exams, people are much more accepting of it. They're like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, you're furthering yourself in your career, you're studying, you're getting further education, whatever. But it's kind of similar. Or if you're like a professional footballer or semi-professional footballer and you're like, I have to get to bed because I have an important match tomorrow. Like if you just frame it that way, for some reason, bodybuilding people don't think about it in the same, they don't give it as much credibility as other things. And like, if you just like reframe it, it's like, it's just a really important goal and endeavor that you have that you can maybe be a bit selfish for, and there's a balance to that, but different levels at different times is appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of phrasing things and putting things, especially because it is like you said, people have, I think, the wrong perception of what bodybuilding means for the vast majority of people. It's just not going to the gym, stepping on the treadmill for 30 minutes just in order for you to feel a little bit better so that you can have the chocolate light later in the night, such as many people are, right? And that is totally all right. I'm not judging people of trying to go to the gym, living a healthier lifestyle. But then, of course, there's sometimes conflicting things and behaviors throughout the day that leads to them not actually seeing any kind of beneficial outcomes from that health endeavor, but for the vast majority of the listeners, it's about kind of reaching a physique that they very much like. And often this doesn't just come with hitting the gym 3 times per week and taking things very, very relaxed and loosely. Also, there are exceptions to the rule, of course, but for the vast majority of people, we can say this. We've been in the game for like 8 years as coaches. I've seen many, many people who've been training since a long time, very much dedicated, very much putting a lot of work and effort in, and still haven't seen the results that they would like to.
Pascal, to flip the script, I have a question for you. So
go ahead.
I saw this reel / short, because it's on YouTube and on Instagram, from Menno Henselmans. Mm-hmm. And I saw it at the time and I had my own thoughts on it and I didn't do anything with it. 2 clients subsequently asked me about it and sent me it, and I gave them my thoughts and perceptions to it. I don't know if you've seen it, but let me just talk you through it. The base assumptions, or the base kind of summary of it, was Menno was saying, if in a fat loss phase you are losing strength, or not gaining strength, not seeing progressive overload, not seeing progressive improvements in performance, then you can't be sure you're maintaining muscle, because you should be at a slower rate still gaining performance because of neurological adaptations. That was kind of the base assumption. So it's like, hey, even if you're holding performance during a fat loss phase, you could well be losing muscle, and you probably are, and you should be, but more slowly gaining performance in the long term. How do you feel about it?
Questionable, in my opinion, at least, based on just what it is that you've shared with me. Maybe there's a little bit more nuance to the entire thing or so.
It's 45-second reel, so
okay.
But I imagine Menno would have
maybe
further
behind it,
thoughts.
if you were to talk with Menno about it, then he could
absolutely.
probably add a much more context to this statement. As we know, sometimes social media, because of the short information span, can be misinterpreted and all that kind of stuff. But let's just take this as a baseline, and let's just throw out that it was Menno who said it. Let's just assume that just a random dude said it. I don't think that this holds true to the vast majority of people, because that would also imply that there's a high correlation between strength and hypertrophy, which we know that there isn't, like a high correlation to it. We know that having more muscle mass could potentiate higher hypertrophic outcomes and vice versa, right? But we also have plenty of examples where the neurological adaptations and technical efficiency hasn't led to a massive amount of hypertrophy. This is point number one. Point number two, I would also then say, if that was the case, then why wouldn't people gain just all the way up to 130 kilograms or so, right? Such as also especially strength athletes, because we then know that strength is correlated also with a little bit of body mass as well. And then once they are cutting down again, they could maintain the strength because neurological adaptations should still go up. And we see it in weight class sports that the lighter weight classes aren't lifting as much weight as the heavier weight classes, even if then the height would still be the same or so. This is just like from an observatory perspective. If I then were to take it from personal anecdotal evidence with clients, for each and every 5 kilograms that people are losing, just as a general rule of thumb, I always expect that the performance is coming down at some point, because people are getting leaner, because leverages are changing as well, and also because a lighter individual is just often not capable of pushing the same amounts of loads as heavier individuals. And that's why I always often even expect that it comes down, especially then the longer you've been cutting for, the more maybe even fatigue has accumulated. But I don't think if you just were to take it slower that this would mitigate the drop in performance. Maybe it would just be masked because, of course, adaptations still take place. And if you take it so slow that you're still making progress, but the weight is coming down so slowly, you may still end up in the same position afterwards. And last but not least, I can also there talk from anecdotal evidence. Most people, they are convinced that they are still able to maintain strength and performance in a cutting phase. But if you then compare the starting performance with the execution of a movement, with their execution of a movement once they have lost like 10, 20 kilograms, and they insist on still moving the same loads for the same repetitions and the same RER, it's a completely different movement because they now live with their ego rather than with their biomechanics and what it is that they physiologically are capable of. I mean, I threw lots of things at you. What are your thoughts around this?
So your thoughts are, as I expected, probably similar to mine because we often think similarly. So there's actually one thing you touched on which is really cool, and that makes me think of Wilkes' points. because Wilks points are basically like, I don't know, it's taking into account your body weight to strength ratio type of thing. And so when I see clients in like extended diets and they're like, oh my God, I lost strength, then I'm like, hey, but if you were to do like a Wilks points, you probably haven't actually lost as much. And that's where your comment on like, again, mass moves mass, like heavier weight classes, they're often stronger. So like they couldn't just cut down and continue to hold that performance because like you said, leverages change. Like it's just you're lifting differently at that point. And so that's definitely something I see. And then the same with...
Which, by the way, Steve, just to throw it in, also then proves that it's not solely muscle mass increments that then move the load, but it's also just total amount of body weight, which then further backs the question of like, is there a tight and high correlation between muscle mass gains and then also strength gains, or is it just like the change of body weight in total?
Yeah, for sure. And secondarily, the thing you mentioned was like that cumulative fatigue. You're just not in a you're not in a position to perform at your best because you're in a calorie deficit, your glycogen depleted, like all the fatigue that comes along with that. Maybe your sleep isn't quite as good. All of those factors lead to you not being able to perform as well. So I just take those two factors as a standalone of like, hey, maybe Menno's comments there stand up in like a really short diet phase where you haven't really changed much in terms of total body mass and you haven't accumulated that much fatigue. But past that, like, hey, like, and I don't want people to think you should expect to lose performance and you shouldn't be going to the gym expecting that necessarily. You should try and hold on to it and gain it. But realistically, 1, maybe 2 mesocycles, and really maybe 2 mesocycles can you keep gaining performance, but past that, you're really not. And especially for advanced lifters who just don't have that much neurological gain to make. Like if you've been hack squatting for 4 months and then you go through a diet phase, you're not like gaining tons of neurological adaptation to the hack squat. You're already a very skilled lifter. Maybe as like a much younger, less advanced lifter, you're getting more of that side. But I just think it's a bit of a crazy assumption to make that you're losing muscle if you're not able to gain performance. I think you're bringing up a
very good point, and that is also training experience plays a huge role in that as well. If you are earlier in your lifting career, you probably have much more potentiation still of then growing even while you're in a cutting phase. And when you then see a significant drop in performance, maybe it has something to do with skill as well. Because also from a lifting perspective, you're not that well advanced. And if leverages change and you haven't really developed a rock solid technique and execution, and then on top of it all, things change in your body that then leads to an even worse outcome from a lifting perspective, then of course, this may then dampen your performance and you have to learn still the skill of lifting. But if you're then a very well advanced trainee, at some point, you will work at the true capacity of what's physically possible for you, and then holding on to the same performance while losing something like 10 kilograms or so seems far-fetched to me. Seems very unrealistic to me because I haven't really yet seen it often.
Especially when you think about like us, how often are we seeing PRs? Like, hey, maybe I can see a meso to meso PR for a movement that I've just cycled in, but after 4 mesos, I'm not seeing PRs every meso anymore. It's like every other, or I need to rotate something else in to like get that kind of, I guess, staleness or whatever it might be, just some even neurological gains on that movement. But like, so you're not seeing neurological advancements very quickly as a more advanced lifter because even in a surplus, you're not seeing performance increases very rapidly.
Yeah. Furthermore, just to bring it back, another thought that came to mind is it is a very bold and clear statement of saying that you are then losing muscle mass if you're then losing strength or performance in a cutting phase. But I think it is safe to say that there has been, over the past years, it has become more and more apparent that what it is that we deemed to be muscle loss over the past years or so is not really... Now, let me put it differently. We thought always that losing muscle mass is easier than it actually is. Losing actual muscle tissue that you've built is very, very hard to come by as long as you're trying your very best to still cross a certain threshold of intensity and a proper resistance training induced overall in your routine. If you do that sufficiently with still taking care of your protein intake, your caloric intake, not doing anything irresponsible. It is very, very hard, in my opinion, to really truly lose muscle mass. And I don't even think that there's lots of evidence around this subject. I could be wrong, but I'm not very much aware of a lot of studies looking at true atrophy that is taking place in a caloric deficit under well-researched circumstances.
Yeah, I think you've looked into this much more than I have. But I think even the studies that have looked into it, like, I don't know if they even differentiate between like actual muscle tissue and then just other fat-free mass areas that could be losing.
Yeah.
You could be losing size in. So it's not even necessarily the muscles themselves. So yeah, I know I asked Ben House, like, if you're holding performance during a cut, can you be sure you're maintaining muscle mass? He was like performance is a good indicator, but it's like there's other things that go into it. You just can't be sure. So it's kind of like you said, do your job in terms of training, do your job in terms of nutrition, don't do anything reckless, and you're probably doing a pretty darn good job.
Yeah, and that's it. Especially like Ben House is probably much more well-versed in that subject than I am. And if he is even skeptical, because he has no way really of measuring it all across the body. What it is that he could be doing is, of course, cross-sectional area analysis. But the thing is, it's just from a certain part of your body, you know? It's not even going deep into the entire body of what's going on. And how should we? Right now, we don't have the technology to really know whether there's atrophy, like true atrophy. And this is what people are saying is muscle loss, you know? And I think that is very questionable that people are losing true actual muscle tissue. Maybe it is, I don't know, plasma changes or tissue changes in general, also water, all that kind of stuff. But true actual atrophy, just because your performance isn't even going up, but maybe just like maintaining or so, I think, I have a very hard time believing that. I could be wrong. I mean, in the future, it could very well be that we have the technology, we have certain ways of figuring that out, and then it becomes more apparent that what we thought is the case has been debunked or disproven, such as science always does most of the time.
The thing it would lead me to think is just you have to diet so much more slowly. You just have to be in a really small deficit, or you do just end up losing muscle. But I then wonder, what's the efficiency cost there? Like, hey, maybe you lose a bit of muscle by being in a slightly more aggressive deficit, but maybe you just regain that back because you lose the fat so much faster, and then you can come back into things. To me, the reel itself, again, like you said, I think especially Menno would have way more thoughts on it. He'd be able to explain himself way more, but just based off that just statement as it were, I think we're definitely on the same page. And I don't know, ultimately, it doesn't change my thoughts about how to go about things.
Yeah, no, not that does it for me. In the end, what's important is you always have to realize that you have a certain amount of time available in your lifting career. So either you can kind of break your head in thinking about those things, and you will never really have the time to prove or disprove it to a certain very much in-depth approach. You can only try your very best with a methodology that works for you, psychologically, but also physiologically. Go with it and then see for yourself whether you think that things happened or not. And also there, people are so bad in perceiving whether they have lost muscle tissue or not. So many people think that they've lost muscle tissue because they've expected that they had more muscle mass to begin with. Once they are leaning down, they think that they've lost muscle, when in reality, it was just favorable fat deposits that they had, which made them appear bigger than they actually are.
Yeah. And also when people are glycogen depleted, that can actually make quite a significant difference to how they look. And if they're depleted and fatigued, so they've got this combination of like subcutaneous water retention from the stress, and then they've also got like flat muscles. When they just remove that, like maybe a couple of weeks after the diet, they're like, oh, actually things are popping a bit more. But it's more likely the scenario you said, where in general, people think they're holding way more muscle than they are, especially I find the more overweight they are, the more they think they've got underneath there. When they're holding more leanness, they don't seem to have that like false perception as much, but especially when, like, I don't know, someone's just done like a perma bulk for 5 years and they think they have 20 pounds of fat, but it's 40. And it's like, oh, okay, my quads are huge. Look at them. It's like, yeah, but you guys, it's really hard to differentiate between fat and muscle at some point.
One more thing to then end it with is what I've actually seen, and also this is not just coming from me, but also people such as Cliff Wilson or even Valentin Tambosi, who had a very, very prolonged season at some point. Those were the individuals who said that in a very lean state, at some point, if you stay in that range for too long and the diet has continued for too long, then you are seeing at some point very stark declines in your performance. And I could see that this is then where you are starting to lose something. But then we are back at the point of like length of a diet. You've been in a lean state for a prolonged period of time. And maybe it is more a correlation between length of a diet and the correlation between body fat percentages and length. So the longer you stay in a low body fat percentage, the more likely it is that performance is then negatively impacted, because the body is, of course, undergoing lots of stress, because you are in that, in quotation marks, survival mechanism mode, in a constant state of alertness, which then perhaps could lead to something like detrimental outcomes around your performance. And by that, then, at some point, it's not a high priority anymore to hold on to muscle mass. I could see this being the case, but for most recreational lifters or people who are listening to our podcast whose cutting phase is like
10 weeks.
3 months, 6 months or so, the body fat percentage never really gets to a point where it is absolutely insane, absolutely diced and shredded. I think that for the vast majority of people, it will probably make very little difference whether you're taking it slower or faster. The results, I would assume, are most of the time the same, and then it boils down to individual differences and preferences of how you like to diet the most. Because I don't like to take things slowly. This is just who I am, right? When I'm delving into a cut, then I like to have it fast, and I've never really felt that it had such negative implications on me. This is now, though. Back then it was a different story, but the skills that I've developed over the years and how I need to diet in order to make it work for me, I've figured out.
Yeah, I think that's something that comes into it as well, as someone's skill set in terms of how good they are at managing every variable to be able to diet aggressively. Like if your sleep generally is just not very good, you're super busy at work, you're super stressed all the time. It doesn't matter if you're really high in body fat. If you start dieting aggressively, you're not going to feel great immediately. Whereas like if you had all of that stuff in check, you're way more able to do that. So we're kind of coming from or at least I am, like a presumption of you have that stuff in check. Because if you don't, maybe you shouldn't even be dieting.
Yeah, and I think that there's no right or wrong answer. If that's Mano's observation and the anecdotal evidence that he has with his clients, then fair enough, I think. Then in the end, especially as a coach, you want to create results for your clients. And we don't have a time machine where we can then turn back time and be like, okay, let's now compare this cutting phase with the other cutting phase, just with a different approach. We don't. So we come up with a certain methodology that we deem best for that given situation, and then we just rock it. Right? And most people get lean and look muscular.
For sure. Yeah. Right. I guess we can leave that discussion there. We've talked for an hour now.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we could probably end up talking more and rambling about it. But I don't think we've got anything to let the listeners know about, because this time next week, that weekend will have been done. We'll both be deloading, probably very tired at this point.
Yes.
You'll have a shaved head.
Yes. Tomorrow's the day.
Yes, we're checking. Oh, is it tomorrow? I thought it was Friday for some reason.
Yeah, no, tomorrow I'm getting my head shaved, and then on Friday is the tattoo appointment.
Cool. Oh. So then, we're checking next week. You'll have to do like a spin for everyone so they can see the back of your head.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we can kind of talk about how the weekend went, which is going to be exciting because is it hot in Germany as well? I'm imagining it's pretty hot.
Yes, it's like 2-3 days it started to get hot again, which is appreciated, because I think there was a time where it was very hot for a long time, and then there was this 1 month where it was just raining constantly and very cold, and I wasn't ready to just say goodbye to the summertime yet.
I probably am. Charlotte was like, I don't know, it was like the weekend. She was like, have you looked at the weather next week? And I was like, oh, please tell me it's just like cool and dry and whatever. And I was like, it's either going to be like storms or it's going to be really hot. And I checked, it was like boiling hot. I was like, damn it.
Oh, man.
And my gym today's shut between, like this morning is normally when I would be training, and it's a bit cooler, but it's shut. So they're not open till later. And I'm like, man, it's going to be such a sweat fest in that gym, especially because it's going to be more packed because more people will have waited to be able to train. It's a tiny gym. Luckily, it's not legs today, but it's going to be, a sweaty one.
Yeah, I feel you, man. So thank you very much for listening and all that kind of stuff. I'm curious to hear what people's take are or is on something like cutting phase. The length, the aggressiveness, performance, the correlation there. Because I'm just curious as to what other people think and also maybe have seen with themselves. So leave it in the comment section below. Leave a like, leave a subscribe, and I guess I'll speak to you guys soon. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality and we know how to do it. And we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut Movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.